Get used to this one, bro. You'll make some peas, you get me, bro? I said you'll get used to this one, you make some peas. You'll make some money this one. Yeah, that's for now. You're gonna go, yeah? She's gonna help you out. She's a nice girl, yeah? Go on, bless my brother. Look after yourself, yeah?
It looked like an ordinary taxi run. Two brothers, a quiet drive, nothing unusual. But that cab was part of a hidden machine, a network moving high-grade cocaine from Dubai into British cities with military precision. No violence, no chaos, just encrypted phones, coded instructions, and drop points across the Midlands. For 408 days, everything worked perfectly. Until one message, a single text, exposed the entire £165 million operation. This is the story of how a taxi became the front for a criminal empire, and how one mistake brought it all crashing down. Paldeep Mangar didn't fit the profile of a kingpin. There was no diamond watch, no exotic vacations, and zero visible streams of income. He resided in a modest terraced home in Willow Row, Darley Abbey, the type of residence you would pass without a second glance. Yet, behind that unassuming white door, he was conducting one of the most profitable drug trafficking operations in British history. At 45, Mangar didn't crave the spotlight. He craved volume. He wasn't dealing in ounces. He was moving bricks, blocks of high-purity cocaine imported directly from Dubai. He commanded kilos, moved them with velocity, and kept his name whispered far above the street-level chaos. This wasn't a one-man hustle. He had constructed a corporate hierarchy beneath him. Couriers, accountants, and distributors, all defined by their roles, not their reputations. There was no need for intimidation or brutality, only ruthless efficiency. He operated like a logistics CEO, coordinating shipments, tracking inventory, and auditing finances, all via encrypted handsets, completely off the radar. It was that silence, that arrogance of invisibility, that allowed him to reign for so long. And yet, from that quiet home in Derby, over £165 million worth of cocaine flowed through his web in barely a year. It wasn't a gang, it was an enterprise. And Mangar sat at the apex, unseen, till the foundation beneath him began to crumble. Once the contraband hit UK soil, it had to move. Not in pockets, but in bulk. That responsibility fell to Jaswant Kajla, the syndicate's logistics architect. A 41-year-old based in Coventry, he didn't require weaponry to maintain order. He relied on strict routes, rigid schedules, and absolute discipline. Kajla didn't just organize transport. He engineered a system of invisibility, pickups in Luton, drop-offs in Derby, cash repatriated through back alleys, service stations, and nondescript car parks. Every move was timed, every scenario rehearsed. He ran it like a legitimate freight network. Couriers adhered to scripts. Mileages were calculated. Risky shortcuts were forbidden. Narcotics traversed cities without raising a single red flag. Just bags exchanged via cabs, taxis, or rental vehicles, often delivered to buyers who had no idea who was pulling the strings. If a handover hit a snag, Kajla didn't panic. He rerouted, reassigned, and kept the pipeline flowing. He was also the liaison for the upper echelon. When operatives flew to Dubai to interface with suppliers, Kajla facilitated it, managing flights, accommodation, and tight itineraries. This wasn't a back alley deal. It was structured like a logistics firm that never slept and never stalled. At their peak, they were moving such vast quantities that police estimated they were generating £400,000 a day, ensuring not a single kilo gathered dust. Kajla ensured his couriers weren't thugs. They were assets trained to deliver and vanish. As long as he kept it clinical, the system remained a ghost until it didn't. While Kajla ensured the product moved, Manraj Johal traced the wealth. Based in Luton, 32 years old and deliberately low-key, Johal never touched the cocaine. His mandate was to track every pound it generated. He managed the ledger like a corporate CFO. Meticulous spreadsheets recorded every transaction, every overhead, every debt owed. No codes, just raw data. He wasn't concealing their earnings, he was auditing them. When cash returned from the streets, it wasn't just counted, it was allocated. Bundles were tagged with token identifiers, linking every stack of notes to a specific deal. If funds went missing, they knew exactly who was responsible and for how much. It was organized crime, structured like forensic accounting. Johal's encrypted device didn't just link him to the gang. It was a direct line to the suppliers in Dubai. He provided regular updates, reporting precise tonnage moved and profit margins achieved. There was no guesswork, no estimation, just cold, hard figures and trust cemented by consistency. He wasn't working alone.
His cousin, Nimrat Bahia,
assisted in the counting and transit of the cash. When authorities raided a London apartment, they found him mid-shift, surrounded by £530,000, stacked, organised, and partially tallied. He was 26, handling more liquidity than most see in a lifetime. Together, they tracked tens of millions without raising an eyebrow. They didn't need shell companies or offshore accounts, just discipline and phones they believed were impenetrable. But every spreadsheet, every token code, every logged payment was another breadcrumb they were unknowingly leaving behind. They didn't refer to them as stash houses. They called them offices. One in Derby, one in Luton. 2 locations hidden in plain view. But these weren't merely safe houses. They were command centres. In Derby, the facility was managed by Manveer Singh. He didn't handle the cash or the drugs directly. He ensured the engine kept running. Revenue poured in from across the nation, was sorted into bundles, logged with token serials, and prepped for the next courier. His duty was to keep the capital circulating cleanly and rapidly. The offices operated like 24-hour assembly lines, cocaine in, currency out. One team managed collections, another bundled the cash. Every role had a function. Every function had a protocol. They didn't stockpile drugs in heaps or keep loose cash in trash bags. They had infrastructure. Apartments and commercial units were transformed into high-volume counting houses. At one stage, police estimated that between £1 million and £2 million could be sitting in a single unit, awaiting redistribution. These were not chaotic dens. They were controlled environments. Phones were utilised only when essential. Names were never uttered. Everything boiled down to metrics, product weight, token codes, and arrival times. Even when police surveillance began, the officers never decelerated. For 408 days, the operation hummed without skipping a beat, till the breach, till the proof arrived. Not via a raid, but through the very devices they thought shielded them. While the officers maintained internal order, a different cast of characters drove demand on the outside. This wasn't a retail operation. The syndicate didn't deal in grams or wraps. They sold in kilos, and their clientele did the same. These were wholesale distributors, trusted enough to take receipt of heavy weight, and wealthy enough to pay up front. Michael Karim was among the most prolific. Operating out of Nottingham, he wasn't just buying for personal gain, he was fueling a regional network. Over the conspiracy's lifespan, police believe he purchased at least 9 kilos. And the profits? They didn't stay under the mattress. He spent loudly. He leased 46 luxury vehicles, BMWs, Mercedes, Range Rovers, dropped £91,000 on 2 penthouse apartments, flew to Vegas, and followed football across Europe. The rest vanished into designer wardrobes, Harvey Nichols, flannels, anything that signaled status. Investigators later calculated his criminal benefit at over £1 million, recovering only a fraction. Other buyers maintained lower profiles. Joseph Davidson, Kelly Williamson, Mohammed Shafi, Narindapal Sahota. Each placed kilo-level orders, cascading the product further down the chain. They didn't operate in chaos. They operated in territories, and while they held no official titles, each played a pivotal role in feeding the beast. None of them knew the intricacies of the supply chain, only that it worked, on time, on weight, with zero delays. And for over a year, that was sufficient. But getting kilos in and cash out required transit. Fast, silent, and obscure. That is where the Iqbal brothers entered the frame. Basharat and Banaras Iqbal weren't runners in the traditional sense. They were taxi drivers, legitimate, licensed, and recognized locally in Derby. The kind of men you would hail without a second thought. Yet, behind the meter, they were the couriers for a national cartel. Basharat, the elder, transported both narcotics and hard currency. While couriers shuttled cash and coke across the map, something else was traveling in the background, silent and unannounced. The gang ran their entire existence through EncroChat. They believed it was a digital fortress, so they spoke without filters. They shared coordinates, drop locations, financial totals, and even personal photographs. One message displayed the interior of a home. Police matched the curtains to a property in Derby. Another captured a dog in the frame, the same dog officers encountered during a subsequent raid. They didn't hide behind ciphers. They conversed openly, daily, placing blind faith in the network. One member even tracked profits to the penny on a spreadsheet, sent directly through the phone he thought was secure. What they didn't realize was that the fortress had already been breached. European law enforcement had infiltrated EncroChat and was live streaming the intelligence to UK investigators. Every text was being mirrored, every movement logged. For weeks, they conducted business as usual, unaware that everything had changed. By the time they discovered the leak, it was too late to pull the plug. By the time the police struck, the map had already been drawn. Nothing was overlooked. Not the conversations, not the exchanges, not the identities behind them. In April 2020, surveillance teams observed a target leaving a residential address in Derby, holdall in hand. He walked calmly to his vehicle. No rush, no lookout, just a short, planned drive across town. Inside that bag sat 7 kilos of cocaine, pristine, packed, high purity. He had no idea that officers were already closing the net. He was stopped quietly. No high-speed chase, no standoff, just a controlled arrest on a quiet road on the city's edge. The drugs were seized. The packaging matched the photos from EncroChat. The weight confirmed the intel. The timing of the handover aligned perfectly with a message intercepted just hours prior. It wasn't merely a drug bust. It was validation. Everything they had read on those screens, the codes, the locations, the magnitude, was real. From that moment, the dominoes began to fall. Warrants were signed. Entry teams were briefed. The targets weren't just the kingpins. They were the couriers, the buyers, the money counters, the coordinators. Everyone with a function. Everyone was boxed in. In London, officers breached a flat to find a scene frozen in time. £530,000 in cash, bundled and tagged mid-sort. Elsewhere, homes were raided with surgical precision. One property yielded a kilo of cocaine. Another concealed stacks of cash in £40,000 bricks. This wasn't chaos. It was a systematic dismantling, address by address. From Derby to Luton, Coventry to Nottingham, the structure didn't just collapse, it was deleted. The courtroom was standing room only. In January 2022, at Derby Crown Court, prosecutors began to unveil the sheer weight of the case, one of the most significant drug conspiracies the region had ever witnessed. It had taken 4 separate trials to reach this climax. Over 408 days, the gang had imported and distributed cocaine valued at over £165 million, utilizing a network stretching from Derby to Dubai. Prosecutor Gareth Wheatman described it as an industrial-scale operation, wholesale Class A trafficking on a national level. He revealed that between March 16th and April 30th, 2020 alone, the gang moved over £18.6 million, averaging more than £400,000 a day. The evidence came directly from the gang's own pockets. No need for undercover agents or informants. The criminals had documented their own destruction. Judge Jonathan Bennett declared that this was no disorganized street crew. It was a structured criminal corporation, and the sentences would reflect the magnitude and discipline of the empire they had built. Then, the gavel fell. Paldeep Mangar, 45, received the harshest penalty, 18 years and 3 months. The court established he was the puppet master, arranging multi-kilo imports from Dubai and commanding the network via encrypted comms. Jaswant Kajla, 41, was sentenced to 15 years and 3 months for architecting the logistics. Manraj Johal, 32, was handed 15 years and 8 months. As the accountant, his spreadsheets tracked the profit margins and debts, reporting financial health back to Dubai. Manveer Singh, 33, took 13 years for managing the Derby office, where the cash flow was centralized. Michael Karim, 36, was jailed for 10 years as a major wholesale buyer. Joseph Davidson, 41, got 10 years and 2 months for distributing both cocaine and heroin. Mohammed Shafi, 38, received 12 years for his dual role as courier and for possession of an illegal firearm found during the probe. Nathaniel Colmore, 39, was jailed for 7 years and 5 months for money laundering and transit. Ranjit Sandhu, 49, was sentenced to 6 years and 10 months for moving volume across the Midlands. Kelly Williamson, 57, received 5 years and 3 months as a trusted buyer in Nottinghamshire.
Nimrat Bahir,
26, was jailed for 7 years and 1 month, caught red-handed with $500,000 in cash. Basharat Iqbal, 46, received 7 years and 9 months. The taxi driver caught with 3 kilos of coke and £20,000 in cash. Banaras Iqbal, 44, got 4 years and 9 months for aiding his brother in laundering proceeds under the guise of legitimate fares. John Castledine, 63, jailed for 7 years and 3 months for his role in cash handling. Adil Sadiq, 35, given 4 years and 7 months for taking over the counting duties. Jermaine Callender, 44, received 3 years for transport. Shay Connell, 38, jailed for 7 years and 9 months for running a courier front. Marvin Johnson, 41, sentenced to 11 years and 6 months for expanding the heroin supply line. In total, 18 individuals were convicted, sharing a combined sentence of 167 years. A total annihilation of a hierarchy they believed was untouchable. What is your take on this case? Did the punishment fit the industrial scale of the crime? Or should the justice system have gone further? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you crave more true crime investigations from the UK underground, subscribe, hit the bell, and stay tuned. There is always another case waiting to be uncovered. The Porsche sat outside. Inside, the flat was spotless, expensive, and silent. 6:03 a.m., Greater Manchester. The first knock, then the ram. Aram Shabani was already in the bathroom, flushing his history. A military-grade phone, smashed, wiped, forced down the toilet. He thought silence would save him. But when police broke through, they found cash, cocaine, a Warhol on the wall, crypto codes in safes. This wasn't just a raid, it was the collapse of a global empire. The morning Britain's most silent kingpin lost everything. To the banks, he looked like a man with high-end options. Clear credit, clean paperwork, properties in Manchester, London, and overseas. On paper, Aram Shabani was a self-made investor, a high-net-worth individual. But there was nothing behind it. No company income, no file tax returns. Between 1999 and 2010, he declared earnings only 5 times, and each of those was linked to mortgage applications. Every declaration backed by forged documents, doctored payslips, fake bank statements, falsified P60 forms. Even the job titles were made up. For a while, it worked. Again and again, he convinced lenders to hand over 6-figure loans. He remortgaged existing homes to release equity, then reinvested that cash into new properties, shifting assets between addresses in Manchester, London, and the Costa del Sol. But what looked like growth was really concealment. Most of the homes weren't in his name. Instead, Shabani used nominees, friends, relatives, even associates with no clear connection to him to make purchases on his behalf. Later, those same properties would be transferred back to him, legally signed over without any money-changing hands. The trail was messy by design. No 2 deals followed the same pattern. Sometimes he bought outright with untraceable cash, other times through third-party loans that relied on forged income records. One flat in Kensington valued at over 1.7 million was handed to him without a recorded payment. Another was held briefly in someone else's name, then quietly re-registered to a company he controlled. Detectives described it as laundering through architecture. Each property has a layer. Each signature is a disguise. The paperwork looked legitimate until you started asking where the money came from. And when GMP's financial team finally did, the whole thing unraveled. By 2019, Shabani held over £5 million in property assets, and not a single one could be tied to lawful income. He hadn't worked a day in decades, but thanks to smoke, mirrors, and silence, he'd spent 20 years living like a mogul without ever being questioned. He didn't hide the money. He wore it. Watches, cars, clothes, artwork. Nothing subtle, nothing second-hand. Aram Shabani didn't just spend, he performed. In Ibiza, he rented luxury villas and posted from private yachts. In Los Angeles, he paid £45,000, nearly equivalent to £31,000 for a hair transplant. In Istanbul, another round of surgery. Same purpose, similar cost range. He had veneers fitted, booked cosmetic work in cash. All of it is part of the image. Youthful, confident, untraceable. To strangers, he was just doing well. To friends, he said it was property, maybe watches, currency trades. But the numbers never added up. There were no visible business operations, no public footprint, just wealth, constant shifting and unexplained. He drove a Porsche Panamera and 2 Bentleys, holidayed in Dubai, Amsterdam, Marbella. He bought original art by Banksy and Andy Warhol. Not prints, but gallery-grade pieces. When police raided his flats, they found them framed on the walls. Later, it would be revealed they'd been purchased using criminal proceeds. His lifestyle was more than indulgent. It was curated. Photos were selected. Designer labels are always visible. Faces carefully cropped. He posted from rooftops, beach clubs, hotel balconies. Never boardrooms. Never work. To investigators, it was a mask, but a very effective one. For years, the lifestyle convinced lenders, neighbors, even friends that Shabani was legitimate. The logic was simple. No one living like that could be running from the law. But detectives were already paying attention. They weren't just watching his spending. They were mapping it, matching every flight, every hotel booking, every car rental to the cash flow underneath. And the deeper they looked, the more obvious it became. The life he built wasn't made of success. It was made of cover stories, plastic surgery, and Class A profits. The money came from somewhere, but Shabani's digital trail didn't. Between 2012 and 2015, he traveled frequently. Dubai, Amsterdam, Ibiza. But one trip in particular stood out. Colombia, December 2013. Unlike every other destination, there were no selfies, no tagged clubs, no airport check-ins. For a man who documented everything, this one was different. Detectives noticed the gap immediately, because Colombia wasn't just a holiday spot, it was the source. A country long associated with the highest purity of cocaine and global export networks. They couldn't follow the money, but they could follow the silence. Encrypted chats, burner phones, and offline transfers made the trail difficult. But geography told its own story. He wasn't flying into party. He was building relationships, setting up import lines, meeting contacts who didn't need to be photographed. Officers would later link his travel to a series of high-volume purchases in the UK. Packaging materials, industrial sealers, financial movement consistent with wholesale supply. He wasn't on the street corner. He was dealing in tons, not grams. Colombia was just one point on the map, but it was the one that changed the way detectives looked at him. Not as a dealer, not even as a distributor, but as a trafficker close to the source. It happened just after 6 a.m., Tuesday, April 9th, 2019. Multiple warrants were executed across the UK and overseas. The main target, Shabani's luxury flat in Bowden, Greater Manchester, a converted church, gated parking, marketed as discreet executive living. He was still in bed when the door came off its hinges. By the time officers entered, he was in the bathroom trying to destroy a phone, not just any handset, an encrypted Encro device. He smashed it, flushed it, and said nothing. He was handcuffed in his boxer shorts. The life outside, designer clothes, private jets, tailored suits, now collapsed into silence. But the flat spoke for him. Police found over £60,000 in cash in a safe. Also found crypto recovery phrases and a bit of cocaine. Simultaneous raids were carried out at a second apartment in Kensington, West London. There, officers found what they called a party box, a stash of Class A and B drugs, cocaine, ecstasy, MDMA. The flat looked more like a gallery than a home. Artwork by Banksy and Andy Warhol hung on the walls, later found to be bought with criminal funds. 3 separate safety deposit boxes were accessed. Between them, they held over £1 million in clean, organised cash. A third location in Ibiza revealed evidence of tenancy agreements and international movement. Receipts, boarding passes, high-value transactions. He hadn't just travelled. He'd built a structure designed to move between jurisdictions without raising alarms. The raids didn't just uncover drugs and money. They stripped away the theatre. And for the first time in almost 2 decades, Aram Shabani's silence wasn't enough to hold everything up. The money was real. The drugs were real. But what made the operation work was what surrounded them. Before the trial, the case investigation split into 2 critical phases. First, what police could see, the drugs, the cash, the encrypted devices. Second, what they had to trace, the digital trail beneath it all. Let's start with the first. Shabani didn't just store cash and cocaine, he protected them. Inside his flats, officers found layers of security, hardware built for criminals who never planned to be caught. 11 cash counting machines. Only 3 were physically recovered. The others were traced through receipts and account histories. Machines designed to process thousands of pounds in minutes. Vacuum sealers, plastic wrapping, acetone. Each item could pass as ordinary, but not when found together. They pointed to packaging processing, a quiet production environment hidden inside residential properties. Shabani used EncroChat devices and operated under the name Iron Key, a crypto recovery code giving access to over 1.5 million in digital currency. Police discovered 2 of the devices smashed and submerged in toilets. One anchor phone was still in pieces when it was recovered from the drain. Even after arrest, Shabani refused to provide PINs or passwords. He gave up on nothing, and some of what was seized will never be unlocked. But it didn't matter, because investigators had already gathered enough from the surrounding data, receipts, backups, duplicate accounts to map the operation. They weren't luxuries. They were tools designed to keep the structure standing long after he was gone. But even the strongest encryption couldn't hold against the volume of evidence now coming in. Police raids and seizures were just the beginning. Greater Manchester Police didn't stop with the flats or the safes. They went deeper into files, emails, travel records, and bank accounts. What followed was one of the most complex digital investigations they'd ever run. Over 1 million documents were pulled together. From online shopping histories to encrypted downloads, from flight manifests to duplicate email accounts. Each one a piece of a much larger map. They found overseas transfers routed through shell accounts, mortgage applications filed with identical forged documents, insurance policies taken out on properties not in his name but paid for by his bank cards. His spending told its own story. High-end purchases in Dubai, club bookings in Amsterdam, tens of thousands spent in LA, where his hotel bills matched the same dates as his hair transplant surgery. Even cash that had once seemed invisible started to form a pattern. In 2 separate stops at UK airports, he was caught carrying more than £42,000 in undeclared currency. He claimed it was travel money, but it matched deposits later traced to mortgage repayments and crypto buys. Emails uncovered showed links between his known addresses and property listings under other names. Payment logs matched foreign receipts. Crypto movement was plotted across multiple wallets, each one branching out, layering transactions, hiding origin. It didn't matter that some devices stayed locked. What mattered was what lived around them. Digital footprints, transaction shadows, clues left behind by a man who thought the real world could cover for what he buried online. And slowly, the case began to close in, not through wiretaps or surveillance, but through the quiet certainty of data that didn't lie. The courtroom wasn't built for spectacle. There were no outbursts, no grand defenses, just silence. The same silence Shabani had relied on from the beginning. The trial opened in mid-2021 at Manchester Crown Court. It ran for 10 weeks. Aram Shabani denied everything. He sat through every session without offering a single explanation for the wealth, the drugs, or the encrypted devices found across his homes. He faced 20 separate charges, covering conspiracy to supply cocaine, fraud, money laundering, forgery, and perverting the course of justice. He had also refused to comply with court orders that required him to unlock encrypted devices seized during the raids. Even then, with years of evidence laid out in front of him, he gave up nothing. The jury didn't need access to his passwords. They had documents, travel records, account histories, and a trail of properties linked together by forged paperwork and silent transfers. Prosecutors described the operation as calculated and controlled. Every layer of his lifestyle, the cars, the surgeries, the flights, was funded by criminal profit and protected by deception. When sentencing finally came, the judge was clear. Shabani was at the head of a large-scale drugs conspiracy. He was handed a 34-year sentence for the core offences. Another 3 years were added for refusing to provide access to encrypted evidence. But this wasn't the end of his conviction. 2 years after the trial ended, the case reopened, not to reduce Shabani's sentence, but to go after his money. In April 2024, at a Proceeds of Crime Act hearing, the court ordered Shabani to repay $3.4 million. It wasn't optional. He had 3 months to pay. If he didn't, he'd face an additional 10 years behind bars. Police had already seized his cash, his crypto, and his properties. But this was about more than assets. It was about dismantling the myth of untouchability, that someone could build an empire on fraud and drugs and still keep what they bought with it. The court accepted that this wasn't just unexplained wealth. It was the proceeds of crime, and every pound would be recovered one way or another. Some say it was justice. Others think it barely scratched the surface. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone, and if this is the kind of story you want more of, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us. There's always another network to expose.